Welcome to the Startup Leader Show, where we learn lessons from leading startup founders and executives. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I am really excited to introduce our guest for today, Sam Adlen. He is the co-CEO of Space Solar. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you, Lisa. Great to be able to join you.
Yeah, thank you so much for making time to be here today. Maybe we can start by having you give a little bit of background on yourself and Space Solar.
Thanks, Lisa. So my background's been predominantly in the space sector. I started out doing a PhD developing hardware with NASA, initially for Mars, and then been in large space and defense primes, what's now Leonardo. A couple of startups, one in the sort of logistics area, one in space, and I spent the last decade in the UK's leading space innovation centre, the Satellite Applications Catapult, working on supporting some of the highest growth space businesses in the world. And I've always believed absolutely passionately in everything that space can do and contribute to a bright future on Earth, which is what has taken me to Space Solar, having followed the incredible evolution of the space sector in the last decade with small satellites. Now, what we're about to see in the next decade with the transformation in launch and capacity and cost, and really the ability to deliver large infrastructure in space has really enabled something like Space Solar to become a reality. It's so Space Solar power has long been considered the ultimate clean energy source, and it is this change in launch costs that's really made it economically incredibly compelling and viable recently. So Space Solar is all about net zero, Lisa. You know, we know that we're going to see huge increases in demand for clean electricity, trebling by 2050, demands in green hydrogen. We're seeing explosions in data centers and AI now. And what space-based solar power gives us is an incredibly capable nuclear energy source, leveraging what is already there as a long-term clean energy source in the sun. You know, frankly, without new clean energy sources, net zero is an illusion. So the concept is all about putting large solar panels up in space and then transmitting that energy wirelessly down to Earth. So much like the transformation we've seen in communications, the future of power is also wireless. And the reasons you pursue space-based solar power are twofold. Firstly, you see the sun all the time up in space. It gives you that baseload energy that's so important. I know you know this from your background. And also, I know it looks quite bright out my window. It's an awful day here in the UK for the summer. But for a country like the UK, putting your solar panels up in space rather than on the ground, you get 13 times more instant energy. And that's what drives the compelling unit economics and what's going to ultimately enable much lower cost to the consumer.
Excellent. How did you come up with this concept originally? Where did this originally come from?
So I definitely cannot claim that at all. So actually, in our office, we have the original comic where Asimov, it was an Isaac Asimov idea. And then ever since in the late 1960s, the first sort of concepts were put out there. And ever since that point, it's been considered technically viable. And it's, as I say, it's the economics that have changed massively. And then at Space Solar, what we've got, our chief architects come up with incredibly capable new design, and that's what's really given us the advantage and the drive to really push Space Solar now.
Wow, amazing. Okay, so where are you in terms of the development process? I mean, when could we potentially see the first solar energy coming from space to Earth?
So our program sees a first power station delivering megawatts, tens of megawatts of power in 6 years' time. Our development program then sees us moving towards gigawatt scale power within 12 years. And then the next steps on the plan. So where we are now, Lisa, we've got a half-meter terrestrial demonstrator of the core technology. So one of the challenges with space solar power is as you go around the orbit, you've got to point at the sun and the Earth at the same time. So many designs have a pretty complex, large mechanical joint. What our design is completely solid state, a bit like a phased array radar. So you can beam in 360 degrees, bit like a lighthouse. And so we've demonstrated that. We've got that working terrestrially. In 18 months, then we go ground to air power beaming over long distance, in space within 3 years, and that first power station deliver tens of megawatts of power within 6 years. And there's the energy needs for this, Lisa, are just huge. There's so many early markets in terms of areas like mining, data centers, maritime. You could overlay it over a solar farm. The receiving antenna is just a sparse net-like structure. So there's so many ways that this can integrate into our energy systems and really drive benefits for everyone.
Wow, amazing. So that is so exciting, and that it could be, you could begin to have some energy coming from space within such a short amount of time. That is very exciting. So I would love to talk a little bit about the kind of the development of the business, and certainly you can harken back to some of your other experiences as well, if it makes sense. But what I'm really interested to learn is, what are some of the biggest keys to your success so far at Space Solar?
As I've mentioned, space solar power has been around since the 60s, so we're not the first business to to look at this. And I think the success that we've had is in large part because we've actually taken a very holistic approach to it. So many companies tend to come at it from a sort of pure technology push angle. We've got the best tech, hence it's going to work. The users will come. But we've taken a very holistic approach, looking at everything from the users, the regulation, the environmental aspects, making sure it really does, on a holistic level, to deliver not just net zero, but its environmental impacts are strong. And importantly, working very early on with industry and government. So with something that many things that involve space, it's sort of international by definition. But for something that's space and energy and transmitting power wirelessly, the need to work with governments and show strong industrial backing from the start has been key. I think that's been really useful for us. I've mentioned the design, so we've got our chief architect Ian Cash. We've got a hugely compelling design. So the key metric, Lisa, for space solar power is specific power. It's the power per unit mass, because the cost of launch is such a critical factor. And our specific power is at least twice as good as nearest competitor for baseload energy, which is fantastic. And then we've built an amazing team. Where we're based is about half an hour south of Oxford, and it's this incredible cluster of space companies and energy companies. So if you want to build a space solar power business, there's no better place than Harwell in the UK.
Excellent. What would you say has been kind of the most valuable business lesson you've learned so far?
I think the sort of lesson that's given me the biggest scar, and hence what I hold quite close, is one of the first company I was a founder of. Was with the joy of hindsight, it was Uber for White Van Man, but it wasn't called that at the time. But we were working, we're being paid to develop the software by a customer, and in the end they decided they liked it a lot, so they thought they'd buy it, which left us with no option. So my big lesson is that in that context, you need at least 3 people to have a party, and extending it more broadly, you've got to give yourself options. So in every aspect of business, I try to make sure there are options available, because it's when you don't have options, when you've only got one route, that you really have to you get forced into making decisions that you really don't want to have to make.
Yeah, great advice. Is there anything that you would do differently if you were to start all over with Space Solar? I understand you've been working on it for over 4 years now.
Yes, that's right. So about 4 years ago, my co-founder and I, Martin Salto, we started work engaging UK government, and actually, on the one hand, it's set incredible foundations. We've got really strong government support. We've got great industrial support, which is and fantastic partnerships and supply chains, which is great. I think probably what I would change is, at the time it felt, I think actually the urgency's got even stronger, Lisa, but perhaps pragmatism starting to come into play, is that we developed a program to really hit net zero timescales, and to balance the sort of cost, risk, and time to market as we thought was best. But actually, there are ways that we could have fitted it to the existing financing infrastructure better than we have today. So our expectation was that developing a program like that's so compelling in terms of the returns to governments, the returns to investors over the long term, that we would be able to get the two to come together to be able to share risk and really make this happen at pace. Still believe that will happen, but actually we've spent quite a long time trying to make it happen. So if I did wind the clock back, what I would do is make it work within the existing sort of VC landscape and bringing government in at a later date. So working on sort of smaller products, the wireless power transmission aspects perhaps first.
Understood. Okay. That, again, excellent advice. So, another thing that I think we often run into are just roadblocks along the way when we're especially developing something that has never been done successfully before, but maybe been talked about for a long time, like this. How have you found are the most effective ways to just work through those roadblocks that come along?
I think a lot of it's to do with culture. And it's probably something I learned far too late in life, that it's a bit of a cliche, but change is the only constant. So making sure that everyone realizes that's the case, and really building flexibility into both your ideas and your processes. I think that makes a huge difference. Keeping things refreshed is important. So both in terms of ideas and people, because actually businesses do have a rhythm. There are periods of real intensity, and then you've got to let people recover and sort of before they go again. So recognizing and being sensitive to that cadence and letting people relax, but also bringing in others to sort of keep energizing stuff. I think purpose is key. Actually, that's what really motivates people even more these days. And actually, that's the thing that gets you out of bed when things aren't going well, and you do have those roadblocks. So purpose and resilience. And I think probably the last thing might be, as much as possible, educating the team and your stakeholders to what the roadblocks are likely to be. So when you come across them, it's not a surprise. Human beings are pretty impressive species, but actually we're not terribly good at surprises. So if you can give people a clue as to what's likely to be challenging in the future, then when it comes, A, they'll have thought about it a little bit in advance, B, it won't be a surprise, and C, you'll probably be energized and motivated to get around it a lot quicker.
Yeah, indeed. Now, of course, it's always all of those things that you didn't think of that end up coming up, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. So, but resilience then deals with those unexpected things that you just can't seem to predict. So, I would love one final thought from you, and that is around the future. So, if you were to make one prediction about the future, what would it be?
I feel like dodging it a little bit, to be honest, Lisa. I think more than any time through the future of through human history, the rate of change is just incredible. You look at AI and some of the health tech advances, the changes are going to be massive. That coupled with the sort of wider geopolitical issues and some of the challenges on Earth, the rate of change is just huge. So predicting the future, I think, is harder than ever. But I think probably we can be pretty firm on one thing, which is that we'll probably be fairly firm on a few, but the one I will pick on is energy. So you look at the increased energy demands that we're seeing across everything, and most recently, I think it's the demands for AI that have come into the picture from left field. And so we are going to need new clean energy sources. And I think whatever happens, I spent much of my career in strategy, and in times of great change and uncertainty, you've got to give yourself options. And so I firmly believe sort of the leaders of the world need to invest at scale to give ourselves options for net zero and a bright future. Move as fast as you can to give yourself the option. And in the case of something like space-based solar power, it's almost a no regrets move, because the benefits you get from going on the journey to working out whether or not it really is a compelling clean energy source are just incredible. So yeah, get behind space solar. I think that's the message.
There you go. Excellent. So if somebody did want to learn more about space solar, what should they do?
Just reach out. We're delighted to have a conversation. We're looking for partners, for people to join the business. We're looking for investors. Lots of ways to engage. You can find lots of materials and FAQs on our website. But yeah, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. Well, I do want to thank you so much for being here today and giving us some background on the work that Space Solar is doing. It's a very exciting future that you have, I'm sure.
Thanks, Lisa.
My pleasure. And I do want to take a moment to thank Guideforce for hosting these sessions. You can learn more about Guideforce at guideforce.com. And we'll see you next time on the Startup Leaders Show.